Morning. This is Brian. Today is Thursday, October 17th, 2019. And this is another episode of Spotlight on Trees. I did an earlier episode on the Southern California walnut, Juglans californica. But today is going to feature, or this episode is going to feature a tree that is part of classic California. Today's spotlight is on the coast live oak. This is Quercus agrifolia, variety agrifolia. It is the classic California tree. It's very much as defining of our state as are the redwoods and giant sequoias. It's a tree that usually grows within 50 miles of the coast and is often found in canyon woodlands like this. Right now I'm in a canyon called Powder Canyon. I'm in between Lobatae Heights and Hacienda Heights and Rowland Heights here in Los Angeles County, just a few miles north of the Orange County border. Coast live oak is a small to medium, sometimes quite a large tree. It can get up to 60, sometimes 80 feet tall. Usually quite a bit smaller than that. However, some of them, what they lack in height, they more than make up with in girth and spread. I'm going to come up closer to a younger one right here. You see the foliage is dark, slightly shiny green. The trunks and crowns are quite crooked, which is very typical for a coast live oak. So this is a fairly typical specimen here, at least in terms of the way it grows. And seedlings of these trees, very, very prolific. The trees germinate a lot. So I'm going to go back up to where there are a couple of larger ones so I can get a little better perspective, but they're not always found in canyons. Sometimes they're found on hilly plains, in grasslands, where they form a very open woodland called a savanna. But a lot of times you're going to find them on north-facing slopes in canyons. And this is pretty much a prime example of their habitat. Trying to see if I can get closer so I can show you the leaf structures. But see, bark is kind of light to medium gray. Get some shallow furrowing in maturity. Just trying to find a young shrub or tree that's near the side of the trail here. Or I can give you a close-up of the leaves. Well, there are some leaves on the ground. See, they're kind of round. They kind of have bristly tips on them. But the leaves are polymorphic. In other words, they have different forms in different growing conditions. Like here's a large, relatively flat leaf right here. Leaves that are in the shade are flatter, larger, because they need more space to capture the light of the sun so they can photosynthesize. But then you get these smaller leaves, and you notice that they're curled over. That's the underside of the leaf right there. Very common in Quercus agrifolia, variety agrifolia. So leaves that are out in sun tend to be smaller. They call it concave or convex, where they curve underneath. You see like that leaf right there. In that leaf, you can see the leaves kind of curl. Here's some nice specimens right here. These are actually fairly typical size coast live oaks, but I have seen them get quite large before as well. Beautiful tree, and when the name suggests it's a live oak, in other words, the tree retains its leaves, or retains leaves year round. Here's a close-up of the bark. I'm just trying to avoid where there's poison oak. Where we got coast live oak, you're gonna have poison oak. Here's a coast live oak trunk. See, if you look carefully, bark is very lightly furrowed. Furrowing and ridging occurs in older trunks and older trees. As you see here, this trunk's a little older and the bark's a little more furrowed. Now, if you notice at the beginning of the video, well, first off, here's a little sapling. You can see the leaves. See, this one's got larger leaves because it's more in the shade of these guys, so it needs to have more leaf surface to photosynthesize. But you notice they kind of curve, the tops kind of curve down, so the edges start curving down. That's an adaptation to the dry climate. Here's a younger one right here. Now the leaf size of these, a little more typical. Like I said, the edges are bristly tipped, so they can be slightly prickly if you touch them. And you can see this one in full sun. You can see how very strongly the leaves are convex. How the leaves curl, literally curl like they're dried and wilting, but they're not. Now, all right, here we go. The beautiful woodland here. Look at the stature. Look at the stature of these trees. Kind of crooked branches. Beautiful form. Now, I'm surprised that I'm not seeing any acorns. Now, they don't produce in mass all the time. I actually rarely see these trees produce acorns for some reason. I've seen them do it, but like a lot of oaks, they have years where they produce barely anything, and then they'll have years where they produce in mass. Now, here's this young one right here, kind of in a pole stage. In other words, it's growing upright, and they can be quite vigorous when they're young. They can be quite fast growing. But what you'll notice is I mentioned something about Quercus agrifolia variety agrifolia at the end of the video. Well, the coast live oak is divided into two varieties. Quercus agrifolia variety agrifolia is the coastal lower elevation version that usually grows in the coastal parts of California, all the way from just north of the Bay Area to Baja California, at low elevations in the coast ranges, coastal canyons and foothills. And then there's another variety which I will spotlight more in detail on another episode, called Southern Coast Live Oak. And some people call it Interior Live Oak, but I don't want to confuse that with Quercus wislizeni, which is called Interior Live Oak. I call it the Southern Coast Live Oak to avoid confusion, and that's Quercus agrifolia variety oxyadenia. That will be spotlighted on a future episode because that's generally a farther inland tree, sometimes really far inland in mountains that even border the desert, but not quite into the desert, and they grow at higher elevations. They can grow to higher elevations. Our coast live oak here is usually found up to maybe about 3,000 feet in elevation, where then it's typically replaced by canyon live oak and interior live oak, Quercus chrysolipus and Quercus wilsoni. The southern coast live oak can be found at elevations above 5,000 feet. I've seen it as high as 5,400 feet on Palomar Mountain. But back to the topic at hand. The coast live oaks here are a member of the red oak group, the Erythrobalanus, or the Lobatae, as they're called. So they are a lot more closely related to black oaks, like our black oaks out here in our mountains, Quercus kellogii. They're more closely related to the black oaks, Quercus volutina back east, and Quercus wilsoni, the interior live oak. They're all in the red oak group. So with that said, oaks do have a propensity to hybridize and can create some very confusing hybrids. Coast live oak is not, I repeat, not an exception. If you see them growing with interior live oaks, they can produce oaks with intermediate traits. If you see them growing with fully winter deciduous black oaks that shed their leaves in the fall, you'll see intermediate characteristics, like some leaves shed off and some stay green. So the coast live oak can and does hybridize quite often with other red oaks. Oaks in the same lineage can hybridize quite often, and quite confusingly, to the frustration of botanists. I've seen hybrids between southern coast live oak, the variety oxyadenia, and California black oak, Quercus kellogii, at Palomar Mountain. So it happens. So, and since they are red oaks, they are also related to a lot of the oaks you see back east, like the scarlet oak, the northern red oak, northern pin oak, the Shumard oak. A lot of those are all in the red oak group. Now, here lies another difference. The coast live oak, unlike just about all the other red oaks I know about, see, the red oaks, typically their acorns ripen in 2 growing seasons. They'll sprout in spring, say they sprout in spring of 2018, they'll ripen in October of 2019. So they take 2 growing seasons. Now, coast live oak, as unique of a tree as it is, and it's very unique, is unique among red oaks as its acorns ripen in 1 growing season. So any acorn that sprouts in April in April 2018 will ripen October 2018. So there you have it. The noble, beautiful coast live oak, Quercus agrifolia, variety agrifolia. A very interesting, yes, it's a dime a dozen. It's a very common tree, but it's a very interesting tree. And it sure makes these north-facing slopes even more charming. So there you have it. The coast live oak, Quercus agrifolia, variety agrifolia. Stay tuned for another episode of Spotlight on Trees, where I highlight another interesting California native, and there might be some episodes where I focus on non-natives. My Spotlight on Trees typically focuses on native plants, but there will be times where I do focus on non-native Southern California plants or California plants. But until then, see you on the next episode of Spotlight on Trees. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.